Well, hey there, friend. Welcome back to another episode of Artworks for Teachers. I'm your host, Susan Riley, and today we're talking all about ed tech. I am joined on the show today by Adam Hyman, who is a veteran media arts technology teacher in New York who empowers students to create in a way that challenges them, fulfills them, and reflects the world around them. He is also the host of the Classroom Dynamics podcast, where he provides free PD on ed tech for teachers all around the world. In today's episode, we're going to be chatting about this incredible journey that he's been on that leads him into being a tech teacher for almost 25 years now at the same school. And you're going to hear how working for the Mets led him to this incredible journey as a teacher. You're not going to want to miss this episode, so I'm excited to introduce you to Adam. Without further ado, let's go. Well, hey, Adam, thank you so much for joining me today.
Absolutely excited to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Of course. So for those who may not know about you or your background, can you share a little bit about yourself, your background, and how you found your way into the world of education and technology?
It's so strange how I found my way into the world of education and technology. Let me tell you, it's such a Forrest Gump kind of story. I've been teaching, this will be my 25th year teaching. But prior to teaching, I actually went to school originally to be in television. I wanted to be on television or on the radio. So it's ironic that I'm doing that now with the Classroom Dynamics podcast and being in education and doing some things that actually are related to television and radio and broadcasting. But long story short, I worked at the Geraldo Rivera talk show for just a few months. I was only making about $19,000 a year. I love telling this story because it's so unbelievable. And a friend of mine who went to Hofstra University with me, he went for business. He couldn't find a job. It was 4 or 5 months already. He couldn't find a job. He went back to their job placement office and stumbled upon an opening for the New York Mets as a videographer scout. So you had to know baseball and you had to be in television and you had to know a little bit about baseball. And he said, you got to go for this job. You're going to love it. It's like right up your alley. You love baseball. You love the Mets. You were in television. This is like, has your name on it. And I thought to myself, there's just no way, right? No way. But long story short, I submitted the resume and I got interviewed in the Mets clubhouse. I didn't think I was going to get the job, but I was grilled for about an hour, about baseball knowledge and things about television. So, and I think I did a pretty decent job, but I just didn't think I was going to get the job. Mm-hmm. And the last question, the guy who interviewed me, he said, "Is there anything else you want to, ask or know?" And I said, "Nah, you know what? I'll be very honest with you." Again, I didn't think I was going to get this job. I said, I don't care if I really get the job. I said, but yeah, I care, but I don't because, to be honest with you, I have bragging rights with my friends for the rest of my life because I've been in the Mets clubhouse. Who gets to be a fan of that team and actually go into that clubhouse? And apparently that's what got me the job because he called me a few hours later at home and said, "Listen, you did really well on the interview. There was nothing wrong." He said, "But what put you, set you apart was your last answer, how you just didn't care if you got it, but you had bragging rights." And he said, "That's all we needed to know." And I said, wow, I was just, again, I didn't think I was going to get it. And so it was that cockiness, I guess, of, all right, it was fun. This is cool. And I have a story for the rest of my life. Well, P.S. I was with the Mets for 5 years. And then what happened, the transition into education was my mom had been a school aide for a number of years in the elementary schools in New York City. And after, the season was over, baseball's only seasonal, spring training till whenever the season ends. She said, "Why don't you, go in and be a substitute? It's better than getting unemployment and doing nothing. You'll make a little bit of money, you'll keep busy, and then when baseball starts, there's no obligation to stay, and you just go back to baseball." And I said, what a great idea. So I started doing that, and I started to like it a lot. And for 2 years, I actually did both, where I actually went back to school to become a teacher. So I was working with the Mets during the day or sometimes at night till 2 in the morning, sometimes going home, sleeping, waking up and going to school for the whole day. And I did that for 2 years. And after 2 years, it just took a toll. Granted, I was 23, 24 years old, but it took a toll and I just couldn't do it anymore. I wasn't getting any benefits or anything like that. So, education to me was a great way to, I don't want to say fall back, but because it wasn't my original plan. But I've that's how I got into education, and I taught sixth grade and fourth grade and even fifth grade for a while, and then about 15 or 16 years ago became the media arts technology teacher at my school, and the rest is history.
Oh, amazing. What an incredible story. And so many twists and turns, which I think, so many people think that you start as an educator and you kind of make this your veteran career forever. But no, there's so many different ways that you can enter and kind of find your way into the field, which I love that story. That's great. And seriously, who gets to sit in the Mets
I
clubhouse?
know it really was a dream come true. I met President Bill Clinton during the 50th anniversary of Jackie
Wow.
Robinson, and I went to the World Series and I got to hang out with the players. It was literally the best time of my life. Such a dream come true. You couldn't ask for anything more. But that's all it was. It was a dream come true. And then once the dream started to fade a little bit, I had to become more of a reality person and get into the quote unquote real world.
Yeah.
Because that really wasn't the real world for me.
Yeah. Yes, but you get to bring that wonderful experience now to all your students as well. So you have been at your school for 25 years now, right?
Okay,
Um,
correct.
what has kept you excited and motivated to stay at that school? So many teachers are struggling with staying right now. So what has been the secret for you?
Yeah, most teachers do leave the profession now. A few years ago, it was within the first 5 years. Now it's actually in the first 3 years sometimes that people are leaving. I like my school. I like where we're located. I like the people we work with are great. The families are always supportive. So it's not a school where you feel like you're being run out. And the technology, because I'm in technology and always use technology, even when I was not a technology teacher. When I was in fourth, fifth, and sixth grade, I was using laptops with the kids. I was creating a class website so that they can go to have all this stuff before Google Classroom was very popular. You know, I think being in technology, even now as a teacher, there's so much technology at everyone's fingertips that
Mhm.
there's always something new. There's always something fun and engaging you can bring into lessons with your kids. Whether it's a project, whether it's creating something in Canva, a timeline or a poster, there's always something that really can enhance what you're doing as a teacher. And I think that's what keeps me going for now. I could technically retire in 5 years and probably will after 30. That's a nice career. But it does allow me to keep things pretty fresh. Just that the idea of what's new this year. Technology is exploding. Now with AI, it's opened up a whole new world.
Yeah.
It's really opened it up to the point where you can say, okay, I can make this fun, and that's where the days kind of go by and fly by.
Yeah, and I really appreciate that because some people find that kind of rapid change to be frustrating or scary because they can't repeat lessons from previous years, right? Because technology becomes outdated. But I love how you really approach this with the idea that of a fresh mindset of being able to kind of open up a Christmas gift,
Yeah.
every year because it's something new. So, as a tech media teacher, what are some specific ways that you use technology to make learning come alive for your students?
It starts, I see kids from grades 1 through 5, and I try to build every, grade level so that it makes sense. And the things that we learned one year just don't go away, but, build on one another as you go through the grades. And, I started in first grade with a simple, very simple program called Tux Paint. I'm sure your listeners have used it or seen it. It
Mhm.
is the most perfect program to use with first graders, even kindergarten, because it teaches them the basics of, what certain icons do, what the computer's going to do if you use that particular, tool. It's obviously it opens it up to engagement and, exploration and creativity beyond belief because it is digital. And let's be honest, I say this all the time. Let's be honest. You put a kid in front of a computer or screen and it's kind of like a horse with blinders. That's all they see. I once did a coding lesson where the kids were pretty much, they got to the point where they were all on their own. I was sitting with someone on the floor working on one of their programs, and the superintendent and the principal stepped in. I had no idea. The kids had no idea. And I turned around and I was like, oh, Dr. Brian, oh my God. Like, I didn't realize you were standing here. And oh, we've been here for 5 minutes. And I was like, wow. And she said, yeah. And she's like, this is the perfect 21st century classroom. You didn't even know I was here. The kids are helping each other. They're all engaged. They're all doing, no one's fooling around. This is fantastic. What did you do to get them to? And, of course, I gave a whole song and dance, but honestly, it was a computer. They're so into it. They love using it no matter what the age. I tell everyone the story of my daughter when she was about 2 years old. I brought home my first iPad and she got into it. And I said, how did you get into my iPad? And I locked it and she preschool. I mean, not even, she's 2. She clicked my passcode and got in. And then, so the hand-eye coordination, just the ability to understand how it works. You and I, we were not born into this. We kind of had to learn it as it came through. And that's the story for most teachers, except if you're a new teacher. If you're a new teacher within the last maybe 5 years, this is something you kind of grew up with. So using technology should be a lot easier to, just incorporate it into lessons than maybe someone who is a veteran who's been around for 30, 35 years. But TuxPaint is such a great one. I use Bill Gilbank's, he created Brush Ninja Animation. What a great program, a free program online to use for anything. You want to show, the life cycle of a butterfly, you can create an animation. You want to show how a three-dimensional figure can rotate and create it yourself. What a great program for use of, in social studies, science, English language arts to create a story. There's so much you can do. So I try to always keep this relevant in terms of what they're learning with their general regular classroom teachers, but to bring in what I can bring in and then just start lifting that level so that they really start to get into it to the point where they're embedding themselves in those lessons that they did and that learning. So, and I think that's just the way I see it. I don't know if that's the perfect way, but it's been working for years now, so I'm not changing.
No, I hear that. And I love how you naturally try to find integrations across content areas so that, we're making learning relevant for our students throughout the day. I'm curious, with your experience with technology and that, we put a screen in front of our students and they're just immediately captured. What are your thoughts on some of these cell phone bans that are going on in schools, or the argument that maybe we shouldn't be having these screens in front of our students for so many hours a day?
I'm going to take it back a step further before I answer that. So, and if I don't answer, just remind me what you wanted.
Tell me
A
about
few years ago, I started starting every year from grades 2 through 5 with a keyboarding unit.
it.
How to touch type, right? Because that was something that kids, you should learn,
Yeah.
And then iPads came into play and cell phones came into play. And a parent during parent teacher conferences, she wasn't being negative. She was just asking just a very generic, like, well, why are you doing keyboarding? I said, well, we do a coding unit and we use the computer all the time in here. They have to know where the letters are and what the function keys do and what the symbols do. They have to know how to navigate a computer, not just by touch. And I even said, state tests in a few years, which already started happening last year, they're all going to be on the computer. They can't spend 20 minutes looking for the T key when they only have 25 minutes to write like a short response. So there's reasoning behind it. Oh, and I'll totally understand. That makes sense. I'm so grateful. That's such a great skill for them to have. And I said, but you know what? To be honest with you, now even typing, and I started, when I learned how to type, it was just chicken pecking 2 fingers, right? It's not that anymore. People are typing with their thumbs, or like me, holding a cell phone with one hand and using their pointer or their middle finger to actually type the words, or even just speak. Use the speak feature on the phone to do that. So to me, I don't, with the cell phones and the bans, I get it, but I don't get it. It makes sense, but it doesn't make sense at the same time. I think in this case, 2 things could be true at the same time. It could be a bad thing, but it could also be a good thing, because if these kids are taking technology into their life, look, you get into a car, you don't know where to go. I'm going to go into maps and I'm going to figure out what's the best way. And if traffic is telling me this is bad, I'm going to take an alternate route.
Right.
Why are we telling kids not to use them when in the real world they're going to have to use them? You know,
Mm-hmm.
Zoom meetings used to be just on the computers. Now Zoom meetings are also can be on a phone. You know, you have everything from FaceTime to all these different applications that you're using. So yes and no. I think to some degree, I think yes, maybe students shouldn't use it. Maybe a teacher should have a little bit more power to say, okay, you can take out your cell phones now, or this is not the time to use them. We once had a situation where our internet went down, and this was years ago. And one of the kids said, "Oh, can I go get my cell phone and use my?" I think at the time it was only like 3G or 2G or something like that. It was a while back. And I thought to myself, I didn't even think of that. Here's a 10-year-old who just suggested, okay, I still want to do my work. And since we have no Wi Fi in the building at the moment, I can go get my cell phone and create a hotspot and continue and not miss a beat. Well, holy wow, go for it. You know, and I sent a bunch of them back to their rooms to get their cell phones. Some of them shared their hotspots, some didn't, some figured out another way to do it offline. But that's the mentality. So, you know, going back to that question about whether or not it's a good thing or not, at times yes, at times no. For emergency purposes, you really want to have them. I would, you know, wouldn't want my own daughter not to have her phone in school.
Yeah.
So I think it's up to debate still, and I think that the best way to do it is still yet to come. But I think eventually, I think someone will figure it out. They should anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm always amazed at hotels that still charge for Wi-Fi because I'm like, why would anybody pay for that when I can just turn on my hotspot?
Yep,
You
that's
know?
it.
Now, you've worked with some pretty innovative companies like Promethean and others. Can you share a couple of standout moments that really impacted the way that you teach and the way that you teach specifically with technology?
Yeah, we once had a parent in our building. She's still there. She's at Scholastic, and she at the time we were just starting to use smart boards. We weren't even at Promethean level yet, but we we're at smart boards. And she said we're starting to change all of our teaching resources into smart board lessons so that teachers can not only use the resource, but they could also get a disc that has the work from the book on it and to kind of seamlessly, you know, interact with the panels or the boards.
Mhm.
And so I was invited to ISTE in Philadelphia. This might have been 2012, and I was asked to demonstrate someone else's work
Mhm.
from a book that they had done. And they sent it to me and I looked it over and I found a couple lessons and it did a demo. Unbeknownst to me, the author of the book was sitting in the front row. I had no idea.
Wow.
And afterwards she came, she was the author and editor from Scholastic. And afterwards she came up to me, she said, introduced herself. This is who I am. You just did my lesson. That was fantastic. I didn't even think about how you did it, how the other teachers would do it. And she said, did you ever think about writing a book? And I said, no, I honestly, I haven't. And she said, think about some topics. And we ultimately decided upon managing the digital classroom, which came out a year later.
Mhm.
So that was a big change because it was just now I wasn't so much in the classroom teaching the kids. Now I was in the classroom teaching the kids, but also creating things that teachers technically around the world at the time could do and use in their classrooms. And I thought that was just a whole different perspective and a whole different way to look at it. And that lens was totally eye-opening because it did make me think, okay, well, if I'm doing it in my classroom this way, is that also going to work for someone who's in England or someone who might have a different standards-based curriculum in Australia? And I had to really start to think about that and build it so that it would be multi-layered like that. And that led me to Promethean, which led me to Logitech, which led me to Classroom Dynamics, the podcast that I do now. So, it's crazy. That's why I say when it was such a Forrest Gump moment back with the Mets, it's that Forrest Gumpian stuff has actually continued to some degree. And I'm always thinking, what's next? What's going to happen next? It's kind of cool.
Yeah. And similarly, that's very similar to how I started this organization. I was actually a music teacher at the time, and we were going through arts integration. I was just using our site to document, this is what's working and what's not. And thinking about that, you're right. It does shift how you look at education beyond just your own classroom. And I think we're all so much luckier to have you do that, right? Because you're saving us steps and you're sharing ideas. And I think that's the brilliance of where our world is headed, is having that open sharing network of community. Now, you've talked about your podcast a couple of times now. Can you tell us more about what you cover on the show and more about where people can find that podcast? Because I would love for them to listen to that as well.
Yeah, Ed, thank you. It's Classroom Dynamics. It's sponsored by Logitech. They are the ones behind the show. They're the ones who actually approached me to do it. And ironically enough, I originally had said no to them when they were asked me. It was a year ago in June, and I said, we just finished the school year. It was a rough year. It was the first really good, solid year back since the pandemic. And I was just like so burnt out. And they were like, well, can you try? And I was like, thank you, but thank you for thinking of me. I think it's a great idea, but I don't think I have it in me now. Well, and then the answer was, well, can you try 3? I said, okay. They twisted my arm over a couple of weeks and can you try 3? We did 3, and the response was so good that they wanted me to do 5 more. And that started to lead into finish up that season, which ended up then season 2, which was the spring. And now we're gearing up for season 3 coming out. And it's all worldwide edtech professional development. That's basically what it is. So, we're not a podcast kind of like yours where it's very informational. We're not a podcast that's complaining about the system, or we're not a podcast complaining about what Joe did in during the math lesson on Friday. We're not that. We're not complainers. We're just more informative, and just trying to keep up with technology is so hard. We kind of touched upon it a little bit before. It is so hard. There are so many things out there, and awesome things. So it's almost like going into, you're a kid in a candy store. Like, where do you go first? What's the best thing to use for your kids, for your grade level, for the topics you're teaching? Are you out of classroom? Are you a support person? Are you teaching at home? Are you, a parent who is an at-home teacher for your own kid? There's so much that we offer. We've done everything from scratch coding with Elaine Atherton. We did have, and these are my 2 favorite ones. We did have, I mentioned already, Tux Paint. Ben Gilbanks was on. He's the creator of the open source Tux Paint. We had Bill Kendricks on from Brush Ninja Animation. We've had Dr. Nadine Embry on. She's from Minecraft. So we're trying to bring this sense of like professional development, because we have to be honest, and I think your listeners are probably going to all shake their head in unison when I say this, but professional development is so hard to come by, especially on a consistent level. There are some schools, they offer professional development, but it's just, let's get through the 45 minutes or the hour. Go plan, work together. There's your professional development. That's not professional development. Professional development is developing your professionalism in what you're doing. And so what we're trying to do is bring this whole sense of, where can I go? What's going to be free and easy? What is something that is going to work for me, and integrate with some of the platforms I already use, like Google Classroom and things like that, so that it just lifts the level of everything that you're doing in a classroom. That is, honestly, I think the bottom line for every teacher. You don't want to get stagnant. You don't want to become boring. You want to engage those kids, because let's face it, engagement also leads to better behavior. So, if you're really putting in the time to listen to our podcast, just to get some tips and tricks and really dive really deeply into some of these programs that are out there, I think it's worthwhile, because then at least you have something to start with, and you could actually hear from the people who are creating it, or hear from the people who are experts in their field, in that particular niche that you're working with education. So that's what we do. It's all, like I said, worldwide professional development. Up until now, in our first year, we've already been listened to in 67 countries and almost 700 cities around the world. It blows my mind, because going back to last year, it was, no thanks, I don't think I want to do this. So go figure, right?
Right?
It's crazy how the world works.
That is so true. You just never know what is right around the corner waiting for you. I'd love that. We're going to put the link to your show in the show links here as well, so that people can find it, subscribe, and listen. But before you go, you've had so many different experiences, from leadership to awards to like just these amazing opportunities, right? Where, from your perspective, and given all of those experiences, where do you see the future of ed tech going, particularly with AI becoming more common?
That is such a great question. I don't think, if I had a crystal ball, it'd be pretty good to answer that question. I don't know. It's just the rate of compounding advancements that are happening are just almost to the point where it's like, okay, if you don't put in that effort to keep up, you are going to fall behind. Like the biggest thing with AI, you've heard this one probably before, AI is not going to replace a teacher. Let's be honest. It's not going to happen, maybe in 100 years. I could totally
Yeah,
see that possibly, but that's like Star Trek beyond science stuff.
right.
But, if you're not using AI, you're not learning how to use it, how to create effective prompts to just help you manage your time or to do something for you that, puts you in two places at once or three places at once sometimes. If you're not using it, then AI won't replace you, but someone who knows how to use AI will replace you.
Yes.
That's the bottom line. So, for all new teachers out there, for all teachers that are seasoned, for all teachers that have been veterans for 25, 30 years like myself, if you're not using it, you are going to fall behind. I think the future of education, if you just look back, forget about the future, look back the last 3 or 4 years. I
Mhm.
think the pandemic had a lot to do with speeding up the process because let's face it, the pandemic happened, everyone panicked, we stayed home for months. I actually taught at home from my basement using a Promethean panel that was sent to me during the pandemic for 6 months.
Wow.
It was crazy. I became like a test subject with Promethean to kind of see if that would be something that futuristic kind of classrooms would. There were parents that thought that I was still in school because I was standing in front of a panel. And so, yeah, could I do my job at home? 100%. Did it for 6 months. I did it very well. I know there were some teachers that had a hard time with it. I know there were some teachers that would never want to go back to it. If I had to, could I? Yes. I don't want to, but it wasn't, to me as a technology teacher and being so immersed in technology, I didn't skip a beat. I felt like I was just doing the same thing I was doing, just the kids physically were not with me. I could
Yeah.
still do everything else. But the pandemic, I think, just put such a fast forward, skip ahead feel to it that, Zoom meetings and, just using classroom websites and Google Classrooms and digital everything.
Yeah.
Now with AI, I think everyone is really trying to jump on that bandwagon because obviously, they want the business. And let's face it, education is a business, whether you like it or not, it's a business.
Yeah.
You might be in it for the kids and you might be in it because this is where your heart is. But
Yeah.
we have to, let's be honest, it's a business. And, so companies are vying for teachers to use their material because of that. So,
Mhm.
I think if you look at it, AI is going to change the way everyone does everything. If I need something really quick, I could actually go to ChatGPT and ask it to create, a 5-question or a 10-question multiple choice, quick assessment on the basics of keyboarding
Yeah.
or a program that we're using. And it will 99.9% of the time, it's done a great job. I might have to tweak a little bit here or there, but if I need a time saver right then and there, boom, I can do it. And
Yeah.
I think that's where it's going to go because even teaching kids, there's a lot of talk now that, computer science and STEM was a big push a couple years ago, and there were mandates to that. I have mandates to do, right, computer safety. I have to do
Right.
computer safety lessons, how to stay safe online. One of my state mandates is a keyboarding unit. I was doing keyboarding before it was mandated. Now it's mandated. All
Right.
these things that I have to do now, computer science, have at least one computer science program unit per grade every year. I have to mandate and check a box and click submit every year at the end of the year. I
Yeah.
think AI and teaching kids how to use AI is going to be just important down the road. I've already done PD workshops for my teachers in my school and my administrators who are sitting there listening to how this is going to work because they want to know how to use it effectively. They don't want to fall behind either. They're doing a different form of the job, but they're still doing the job. So
Mhm.
how do you do that effectively, quickly, efficiently? Unfortunately, AI is going to have to become part of your repertoire. Otherwise, you're definitely going to feel the pinch. And I wouldn't even go as far to say in a year or two. I would say in a couple of months, if
Yeah.
you're not using it, you're going to feel the pinch.
Yeah, 100% agree. We've also done PD for teachers with AI and just the possibilities. As long as you know how to create the prompts, how to get really focused with it, the possibilities are really endless for the ways that you can use it and save yourself a ton of time. So I'm so glad that you brought that up and that you shared like the positives. There's so many, so many people who talk about the negatives of AI, but there's got to be so many positives as well while we're wrapping our heads around all of the other things that come with that. So I appreciate.
One of the things that you just mentioned is one of the positives is higher order thinking skills, because
Yeah,
if you're not using those higher order thinking skills to prompt effectively, you're not going to get the output that you're looking for. So
exactly.
the thinking process is different. It's like telling a computer what you want from it. I want this and that, and be sure to also include this and that, and don't forget to
Yeah.
the idea of how you actually have to think that for a kid is going to be a whole different process in the future, even for the teachers, than it is now, for sure.
100%. 100%. Well, Adam, this has been such an enlightening interview. Thank you so much for sharing all of these ideas with us today. Where can people stay in touch with you and find out more?
You could just follow us on Classroom Dynamics. You can find us on all the podcast platforms: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, the whole gamut. We're on all of them. You could also find us on Twitter at Class Dynamics, and we're also on Instagram at Classroom Dynamics Podcast. So hope you'll join us and get ready for a great season coming up.
Wonderful. We'll be sure to put those in the show notes as well. Thank you so much for your time today and for sharing so much about tech with us.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure. I had a great time.
Wonderful.